What's up, guys, and welcome back to episode 21 of the podcast. Today I'm going to discuss mobility training and mixing mobility training with strength training. So before I jump into it, I want to just talk a small bit about my foundational mobility program that's open it's out at the minute, and you can get it on my website. It's basically an entry level into mobility and movement, and it has a range of different exercises. So it works through range of motion exercises, it works through strength exercises, and it works through breathing exercises, and it incorporates them all over a 6-week period. And then the exercises can be scaled then after that. So if you're looking to extend it on and you want to improve what you were doing, then you can extend the exercises and you will be able to basically advance them, is what I'm trying to say. You'll be able to advance them after that. So to jump right into it then, this episode is going to be for people who would have an interest obviously in mobility and have an interest in strength training and are doing both of them but don't know how to mix them together and get the best out of their sessions. So what I'm going to start talking about first is what a lot of people mix up with mobility training and flexibility training. So mobility is your range of motion of your joints and how well you move. Mobility in its essence is movement. So it depends how you get from one place to another, how free you are to move. Now, flexibility is how much a muscle can stretch or lengthen. So, and that's passively or actively, but passively is what flexibility looks at a small bit more. So once you have an idea of that and you kind of get a better understanding of what that does or what that means, then it's easier to program your sessions mobility wise. And what I would be saying is, it depends what your goals are. Obviously, if you enjoy lying down, if you enjoy stretching and doing a couple of movements, or just even holding static stretches, and yoga is good, but it's actually loaded, so it's not just straight stretching, because you're loading it, and I'll talk about that as we go through this. You're building strength at length as well. Okay, so you're not just looking to stretch a muscle to stretch it for any reason. You're looking to stretch it, and then you're looking to strengthen it. Okay, and that's where mobility comes into. You want to be able to stretch it, and then you want to be able to strengthen it as well. And what I mean when I say you want to stretch it is you have to bring it to its end range, and you have to bring the joint to its end range to be able to strengthen it at length. Okay, so that's kind of the main thing we're going to be looking at here, is bringing your joints to their end range of motion and then strengthening it at that range. And there's loads of ways you can do this, and this is kind of where the people get confused between mobility training and strength training, because mobility training is a form of strength training. It definitely is. You are trying to obviously build strength. You're obviously trying to get better and adapt and progress. And same as strength training, let's say if you're squatting and you are going up 2 kilo every week, or you're increasing your squat progressively. You have to be increasing your mobility. When you're mobility training, you have to be increasing it progressively as well. So we'll start from the baseline, and the baseline is actually first taking down any pain or sensitivity around the area, and then getting it moving more and getting it moving into the end range. So when you do bring your muscle to its end of range, you basically have these things inside the muscle, and they're called muscle spindles. And you have a Golgi tendon organ as well, which is on your tendons, but they're sensors and they're stretch receptors. So when your muscle comes past a certain distance, or if when it stretches a certain amount, they will send an impulse to your body or to your nervous system, and your nervous system will contract. And it'll stop. It does that to stop you from injuring yourself, and it does that to stop you from tearing a muscle. Now, if these are hyperactive, you will find that your flexibility is going to be affected overall, because anytime you bring them outside of their range, and you'll notice that anyone that has injured a hamstring or injured a muscle, they'll have less flexibility in that muscle, and it's a protective mechanism a lot of the time, because you can get it back, but it is a protective mechanism. So you have to override that system. And a couple of ways you can override it. You can override it with just through breathing alone. So controlled breathing, controlled inhale and controlled exhales. Or you can also, what we'll talk about a small bit more in this, is bring it to end range and then contracting the muscle. And if you contract the muscle at end range, that kind of, I don't want to say reprograms, but it does in a way reprogram the muscle to have a better understanding of how far you can go. So it will let you go a bit further next time, and it'll higher that threshold to when it actually contracts the muscle. So when you actually start contracting it at end range, then you can bring in more load into it, and you can strengthen it at an end range. And if you start strengthening it at end range, then you can begin to use that actively as well. Now, it depends what your goals are overall. So if your goals are just to get feeling good again, get you moving properly again, then your best thing to start out with is probably just getting range of motion exercises, different things to get the joints moving again. All right, and then you want to start loading them a small bit more after that. But if you're going to kick up, if your body's going to kick up and give you a lot of pain from bringing it to a certain position, it's going to be hard to start loading it straight away in that position. So you have to obviously take a step back and then get a bit of movement there, and then you want to start strengthening it and loading it a small bit more. And when I say loading it, it doesn't have to be with weight. You can just be loading it with body weight as well. Like, you don't have to be holding dumbbells or holding a barbell or anything like that. You can start loading at body weight. So let's take, for example, the glutes or the hips is a simple one to do it, or a simple one to talk about. So if you come into, I'm just going to spitball in here, but off the top of my head, if you come into a pigeon pose, which is you're down on the ground, one leg is up in front, and it's basically it's up in front and across you, and you're trying to get your hip to the ground, and it stretches the glutes at the back. But you can change that pigeon pose to a 90-90 position. Now, anyone who doesn't know these, just look them up. You'll find them straight away, and I have them on my page as well. So change to your 90-90 position. When you're 90-90, then you can start rolling over and back and transitions, and you're changing it, and then you're using the muscles, and then you can start to load it by bringing your weight down over. It's already stretched. It's already in a similar stretch, or stretched to a similar degree when to the pigeon pose, I should say, the 90-90 position is, but you're able to control and put down a small bit more weight over it. And you can use your leg on the ground to push into the ground or to put it up towards you, depending on what you're trying to work on, to contract the muscles of that area while it's in a stretched position. So while it's at full length, you're basically pushing into it and you're contracting, and that's building strength. And what you're doing is you're actually working physiologically, you're working on the fibers. So the fibers are connecting there. There's this thing called a length tension relationship, and I'll go into a bit more detail as I go through this podcast, but you're basically improving the connections between the fibers, and you're actin and myosin, if anyone wants to go into that detail of it, so that they're able to grip on and hold on to each other, because that's what they do. And that's why it's so much easier to do a bicep curl or a pull-up from midway than it is to lock out and then come back up. That's the length tension relationship. So before I go into a bit more detail on that, I want to talk about what's stopping people from getting into those positions in the first place, and what's stopping people from building strength at length, and why do they kind of avoid these positions that they feel uncomfortable in. A lot of people I talk to, and I could either be in a physio consultation or a mobility consultation with them, and when I talk to them about different positions, or could you get into the different positions, or have you been in that position even, a lot of them are afraid of different movements because they feel it could be bad for the joints. Now, the most common one you could think of is, let's say, bending your back when you're picking something up, and saying that that's bad for you, and it's bad for your back and bad for your joints. Now, like, these fears and beliefs of loading joints can hinder your progress especially when you get into mobility first, because you don't really want to go too far in case you injure yourself, and obviously that's always a concern. And if you overreach, at times you're going to injure yourself. But you have to realize that the body, the reason it exists today is to reproduce, let's say, and it is a healing and adaptation machine, I guess you could say. So it will recover from basically nearly anything once you give it the right time, and once time is on your side, obviously. But once you give it the right amount of recovery time, and you progress and you regress, and you're going through the right recovery protocols and doing the right things for recovery, because that's what it's been doing since you were born, and that's what it will do till you die, is it will heal and it'll adapt, and it'll continue to do that, and it'll only do that if you're overreaching. So overreaching is going just outside your bounds, and then you come back and you let it heal, you let it recover. So it's the exact same as strength training itself. You're going to go to a certain weight and you lift it for a certain set and rep, or certain sets and reps, and then you're going to come back and you're going to recover, and then you're going to go the next day and you're going to go again, or you might even increase your weight the next day. And the reason you're doing that is to get that progressive overload, to build strength, to build muscle, and to have the nervous system changes so that you'll be able to go again the next day, and overall then you'll have a better body composition, or you'll be a better performer on the field, or whatever your goals are. but you're doing it through progressive overload. And progressive overload works on all systems in the body, from your respiratory system to your nervous system to your brain to your muscles to your joints. It's going to work across all of them. So once it's given enough recovery time, in general, you should be, and you take all the right recovery protocols, or right, you go down the right path of rehabbing it right and doing all the right stuff in terms of sleep and hydration and all that, then it will heal. And when it heals, it'll be stronger. So to actually get the best out of mobility training, you have to have an understanding that your joints are there to be brought through their full range of motion, and your body's there to heal it as well, obviously given enough time. So keeping that in mind when you are doing it, and when you have those fears of, if you fear that, all right, bending down and picking something up here is going to be bad for my back, like, that's not a thing. What they say to do is anything that's under, let's say 20 to 30 kilo, you probably should be bending your back to pick it up, because your back needs to go through its full range of motion. It was meant to do that. Now, if you do it cold and you go lifting something as heavy as you can, the same as if you went kicking something as hard as you can cold, you're likely to tear a muscle. That's likely to happen, but that's going to happen anyway in these situations. So getting over the fears of that joints need to be protected, because they don't need to be protected. They need to be built up and they need to be strengthened, and the area around them needs to be strengthened, and they need circulation to heal, and they're not going to get circulation unless you're moving them, because that's obviously how the body works. So getting over that thing of the body is fragile, and changing your mindset to the body is a healing and adaptation machine, and that it can recover from anything, will have a massive impact on your ability to train down the road. From there, then we're moving on to what goals you're looking at. And I touched on these at the very start. If you're looking to get the body moving more and just general kind of take away stiffness and tightness and that, and you want to just kind of bring your joints to their full range of motion, then those range of motion exercises are good to get it moving and to help you recover. And you're basically just practicing, say, on the ground. It could be yoga, or it could be anything. It could be mobility specific. You're basically just practicing bringing it through its full range of motion without weight at the start. And that's just to get you moving again. So it's like a warm-up before a session. You will start with movement exercise, and then you'll move into, you're progressive into more, let's say, running exercises and jumping and stuff like that, landing and tackles and stuff. You're going to progress into that before a game. But you're going to start with your normal basic movements first, or close to them. And that's obviously just to get the range of motion and get the body woken up. So that's if you want to just get it moving better at the start. Now, if you really want to progress on, and let's say your sport is something like jiu-jitsu, where you need to have serious mobility and flexibility and all that, and good control over your joints, then you need to start progressing on to loading them a small bit more and loading them in positions that you're going to be using them in. And to do that, then you have to look at the positions, you have to break it down, and you have to start seeing first, can I progress it with body weight? And then after body weight, can I progress it with dumbbells or light kettlebells? And then if I keep doing it, you can continue on and then can keep increasing it whatever way you can, as long as it's safe and as long as you are able to handle it, and that you don't go from doing body weight to lifting massive weights at end range, because you will likely injure yourself if you do that, because you've progressed too high or you've overreached too far. So it's progress and then adapt, progress and adapt. So, but the one thing about that is, as I've mentioned, that overreaching, you need to do that. You have to be overreaching, pushing past your limits. Overreaching is basically when you're going past your limits. You need to be doing that to progress, because if you only stay within your comfort zone, you will only stay within your comfort zone. That's all that'll happen. Nothing will change. The other one is, if nothing changes, nothing will change. So it's important you actually are working at your limits and pushing past your limits and checking out where your limits are, and maybe reassessing and using breathing to try to get a small bit further. Because as I said, we're overriding that system as well, that muscle spindle. I should touch on as well, because I know there's a good population that listen to this podcast that play GAA or rugby, and that if you are looking for injury prevention stuff, you are looking to load your joints in different positions, because you want to get them as strong as possible. You want to get, obviously, your body strong, but you want to get your joints strong and stable and able to control your body weight. So it's important to look to progress those as well as you go through it. So why is loading your joints at full range? Why is it important for your muscles and joints? Well, I touched on it earlier on about how loading them at full range or bringing them through their full range of motion is going to increase the circulation and it's going to build strength around them. So it's going to reduce your risk of osteoarthritis in the future, like something like that, osteoporosis in the future, because you're keeping your joints in good condition throughout your life. So you're not trying to catch up later on. Now you can catch up still. It's going to be a small bit harder when you're older, but it's doable. You can definitely do it. But it's really important to load them at their end range because you want to be strong at end range. If you are, let's say, on the pitch and you're running and you overreach with a step or a side step, you want your body to be able to handle that load, even if it's only for a second or a couple of seconds. You want it to be able to handle that load. And if it does that, or if it is able to handle that load, you'll be less likely to injure yourself. So you can see why loading them at end range, loading them close to end range is really important because of that, and it builds strength there as well. So it builds strength in the muscles, in the ligaments, and the joints themselves are better able to handle the weight and distribute the weight. So it's going to be good obviously for cartilage as well. That's another thing. You're going to bring more circulation to it. But I'm going to touch on this length tension relationship, and I said it at the start, but I'm only going to follow through on it now about why it affects your strength levels or why you're stronger at certain ranges. And it comes back to that, what I've said about the actin and myosin fibers, and they connect and they bind. And if you think about, if you're doing a pull-up, let's say, and if you if you jump up to the top of the bar and you let yourself down an inch, you'll be able to pull yourself up fairly easily. And that's because most of the muscle fibers are already connected and have already bound. So when you let yourself down lower and lower and lower, then you're losing those connections and bonds and they're getting further apart. So the further away you move the joint, or the bigger an angle you make the joint, then that means the harder it is for the muscle to contract fully and to come all the way back up. So another one is if you look at like a bicep curl and you start with your arms locked out and you try to bring it up, the first couple of degrees are going to be very tough because that is when the fibers aren't connected, haven't bonded, and they're trying to reach each other. And then because of the fact that they're trying to reach each other, you're going to be a bit weaker in that range. But when they do start bonding, then the rest of them will follow along and follow suit, and you'll get stronger as you come up through it. Now the goal then, when you are mobility training, or when you're trying to improve your overall movement and your strength levels and your mobility, what you're doing is you're trying to build strength at strength at length, I suppose it is. So you're trying to build it at the end range of your joints, because then the actin and myosin will be able to bond better and you'll have more strength throughout your full range of motion, as opposed to having a lot of strength at the top and very weak at the end. Now, that's the basis of mixing strength training in with mobility training. How do you do that is the next thing. So really quickly, run over that again. You're trying to build strength at length because of the fact that you lose a lot of strength the further away you go. So when the angle is increasing, you're going to lose a lot more strength. And then because of that, you won't be able to pull back up. So if you're curling, if you're doing anything, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So when you're playing sports, you want to be strong throughout the range because you don't think of what range of motion you're in all the time. Now, how can you do that in the gym? Well, you can look up mobility exercises and you can explore how you move and check, work on different ranges. But you could even just bring or if you're stretching, you can even bring contractions into that, or weight you're stretching as well. All simple ways of doing it. But if you're in the gym itself, you're looking to, let's say, squat to your full range of motion. So squat down as low as you can, even if your back has to be against the wall, and then come out of it. Now, I definitely would not suggest squatting as low as you can with a really high weight, because if you haven't done it before, because you're going to get stuck down there and you're going to injure yourself. And that's where that bit of just being a bit smart about what you're doing goes a long way. So squatting to full depth is a good one. Working on like bear crawls and crab walks on the ground are good as well, because you're challenging the joints and you're working on the coordination, and it's a tough exercise on the quads. So they're excellent ones as well. And then other ones will be like back extensions. It's important to load the back all the way, both ways. You can go for like a Jefferson curl with that, and then weighted Jefferson curl as well. Really all you're doing is you're just adding weights to end range movements. But making sure you are going to end range. So if you're going doing pull-ups, you're locking out and you're coming all the way down, as opposed to just getting 5 good ones or 10 good ones at mid-range because there's somebody looking at you doing it. It's a lot better to go down, build your strength as best you can all the way through the movement, because that way it will be easier to do it next time. Obviously you'll progress, you'll get stronger, and then over time you won't even think about it. You'll be going all the way down and all the way up anyway, and it'll be no issue to you. But a lot of people get caught especially in the gym, is getting caught with the ego. And the ego is that there's obviously someone here that may be looking at me, so I need to keep upping my weight. And then you up your weight a good bit, but then you don't go through any range of motion. So you're getting very strong in a very small range of motion, which doesn't transfer to fuck all really. So it's important to watch out for that. Watch that you're not ego tripping and reducing your range of motion and reducing all your lifts and that, or your ability, because you want to look good in the 5 minutes that you think that there's somebody looking at you. Really in that 5 minutes, the 10 or 15 seconds that there might be someone looking at you. So you have to really watch that and step back from that and work on going to your end range and work on building strength there. And the first couple of days are going to be very hard. And then after that, it does get easier. Other things you can do is you can go through a couple of mobility movements first to get the range of motion, and then so you're moving better, and then try put a strength exercise into that and mix it with it. So one I use a lot of the time would be like a hamstring glide into there's like a hip flexor hamstring movement, anything like that. And then even bridge walkouts to build the strength all the way through the hamstrings, or even a 45-degree hamstring bridge. It could be an RDL, making sure people get down to the bottom of the RDL or as far down as they can go. And if they're able to go down far, get a stiff leg deadlift where you put a plate on the ground and they stand on that, and then make it a small bit lower. So there's always ways you can progress it, and it's important to be working and building strength within those ranges so you joints will last or be in good condition as you age and as you get older. But to get to those, you obviously have to start small and build your way up. And then really it's just practice getting out of your comfort zone and varying your movements, changing them up, looking up videos of different movements. I have mobility sessions on my page if you're stuck to look through them, and I'm hopefully start doing them again soon enough. But they'll give you a better idea of what to do and what to include. And it's just varying your movements, exploring how you move, changing them up, testing your balance, doing all that, focusing on like closing your eyes, anything you can think of. Jumping walls, like parkour, is an excellent one because it's obviously changing how people are moving all the time, and you have to. It's it's a very flowy type of a sport. Like jiu-jitsu as well, because you vary your movement so much, and it's so changing. You could be in any position. So change them up, practice getting out of your comfort zone, and once you are, then find a movement you like, then you can start loading it after that. But if you're talking about strength training itself, you're looking at obviously building it within your normal range. So like if you're looking for performance now, I should cover this up. Performance and straight mobility training are two different things. So they're similar, like in ways they can be the exact same. But if I was telling you if you were let's say for example, if you were a 100-meter sprinter, I wouldn't be telling you to do full distance squats or ass to grass squats, because it would affect your speed and your turnover. So I'd be telling you to drop down into angles that would be used in sprinting a small bit more. So that's where the technique of it and the skill of it comes into a bit more. But if you're interested in overall improvement in mobility and movement, then you are looking to increase your range of motion in the gym and throughout different exercises. And then when you are mixing strength with mobility, you also have to look at, let's say, your rib cage and your feet as well, and building your feet up so they're strong. Okay, because it is a thing that's missed out on by a lot of people, is actually building up your feet and making them stronger, and they're your first contact at the ground. So it's really important to do that. But that's another one that I would say that people need to do a small bit more is train the feet and then train your rib cage as well, because it dictates what goes on up and down the chain. But mixing those in and practicing your breathing, expanding out your rib cage front and back, not just front. So expanding everything out, getting as wide as you can, and then exhaling fully, contracting the abs, and again. And you're just basically getting everything moving just that small bit better. But guys, that's everything I wanted to chat about today. As I said, if anyone's interested in that foundational mobility program and they want to get a better idea of different movements and mobility exercises that they can do, and they can have daily workouts, to follow for the next 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how long you're going to commit to it, and then you can scale it so it scales, so you can increase it then and go on for another 6 weeks after that, moving from the beginner to the advanced exercises. That's available on my website, or you can find it if you go onto my Instagram. It's in my bio. But yeah, that's everything from me today, guys. Thanks a million for listening, and I'll chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.